Okay, so I know my content is usually focused on decluttering and creating a super simple and peaceful home, which I absolutely am obsessed with. However, I know for our family over the last few years, maybe 6, 8 years of us kind of creating a simplified home and a simplified life, that there are so many other aspects of our life that have also, evolved and changed and morphed as we've decluttered and changed our consuming habits. Another big part of our life that has been impacted is our personal finance and our budget. Our budget honestly has done probably a 360 over the last 6 or so years. One big thing was we had a debt of almost $80,000, which we paid off in 2 years. Since then, we have made like leaps and bounds in terms of our mortgage and our retirement, more changes or more like investments than I honestly ever thought possible for our family. And in the past year, we've taken even a few more steps forward, a few more big changes. And I wanted to share that with you here today and share with you my most recent favorite personal finance book that I thought might resonate with some of you as well. For anyone who's new, my name is Marianne. I live here in Canada with my husband and kids ages 6 and 8, and I make videos on simplifying life and motherhood through easy organization and decluttering, and sometimes about budgeting. A few years ago, I picked up a book from the library called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I vaguely remember reading like a chapter or two and just thinking, you know what, this is not for me, not now. It just did not resonate with me for whatever reason. I don't remember returning to the library and just carrying on with my life and carrying on with how we budgeted already. Fast forward to about a year and a half ago, and Scott and I were away at a little weekend getaway, just the two of us. It was lovely, and we were like walking around a little bookstore, and we were probably sipping coffee, loving life. And I remember coming across this personal finance workbook, and it was called My Rich Life. And honestly, at the time, it still didn't click in that it was the same author, Ramit, as who wrote the book that I barely didn't read. And for whatever reason though, this workbook just like spoke to me. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take this home and I think I really need to like reflect on a few of these questions. Well, finally, fast forwarded to this last August, and my husband turned 40, and for whatever reason, something within me clicked, and I'm just like, we need to get our like future planning set. And as soon as I sat down with it, I just devoured it. I loved all of the exercises, even the ones I hated, I ended up liking. And I also started watching a ton of Ramit's videos, his YouTube videos, and he has like a podcast, and I was just like soaking it all in. And so today, in today's video, I am gonna share 3 key takeaways that I took away from the workbook, and in hopes that maybe it might help some of you as well. So obviously, maybe not so obviously, but obviously Ramit did not sponsor this video. This is 100% just my opinions and my sort of like experience with the workbook this past summer. Takeaway number 1 was really figuring out what I did not like spending money on, what was not a priority for me and our family, yet we were still spending money on it. This is something that sounds so obvious, and like looking back, I think I subconsciously knew this information, but there was something about actually sitting down, writing it out, reflecting on this that really has been absolutely truly life-changing. One of the big things for me was that I'm naturally pretty introverted. I can honestly spend a ton of time alone and be really happy with that. And however, I'm also sort of a people pleaser, and I sort of just in terms socially, I just sort of go along with the flow. So I was finding that there were a lot of situations where I was, being invited to events or activities and saying yes just out of habit. And then I'd end up spending, hundreds of dollars in one night, and then waking up the next day and being like, that really wasn't that fun. I would have rather been at home with a book, and I just lost, $300. So not only figuring that out and really thinking about it, but then taking action on it and being like, wait a second, I could just say no to that. And then I could spend that $300 on something I do love, and I wouldn't have to go to that party or whatever it was I was at. Another big one for me was alcohol. It was almost like it was something that just kind of carried on from my 20s, that I was still drinking and spending money on drinks and wine and all of it. And honestly, I really didn't care about it anymore. It just wasn't something I really enjoyed. Then I got to the point where I'm like, wait a second, I could just like not buy this. That would be amazing. I would have an extra $30 in my pocket and I wouldn't have to be drinking this alcohol. So an example from the workbook. Here's the workbook here. It's pretty classic, My Rich Life. And so on page 115, which is in chapter 5, the chapter is called By Your Happiness. And Ramit has like a whole table that you can work out, and it's called Identify What's Important to You. So decide how much you want to cut back on areas that just aren't meaningful. And I can see right here, social commitments I don't want to do. Right there, number one area to cut back. It sounds so simple, but that was a huge takeaway for me this summer. Takeaway number 2 was like the whole money psychology aspect of it, which Ramit talks about a ton in a lot of his interviews with people that he's working with clients. It's honestly truly fascinating. I personally grew up with, which is very common I think, is to grow up with one parent who is a spender and one who's extremely frugal. And not only that, but within my childhood, there with a lot of highs and lows when it came to money. So just being able to reflect on that and think, oh, like that explains like why I do this, and this, and why I like have like such a strong chokehold on money and our budget and making sure that we're gonna have enough money, and constantly feeling like I have to cut back on things. And then from there, being able to pinpoint, okay, yes, knowing how much I need for retirement is truly really important to me, and I know that I need to have this much money every month when I'm 85 and when we're living in a nursing home. This is how much we're gonna need, and this is how much between now and then, this is how much we need to save every month to get there. And being able to get to that point has truly been so eye-opening. Another part from the book, a quote that Ramit had in there on page 117 was, in personal finance, we overvalue math and undervalue psychology. And honestly, after I read that, I'm like, oh yeah. And the crazy part is I'm like the money manager in our family, and I've always prided myself on being like non-emotional about it, practical, just focusing on the numbers. And yet when I reflected on it, I'm like, there's been so much emotion behind basically every single decision. Takeaway number 3, the final takeaway, was the idea of actually living what he refers to as this rich life. So someone who's like myself, who's naturally frugal, I am an expert at cutting back. I'm very good at budgeting like day to day and being thrifty. But the idea of actually enjoying my money and thinking, wow, I actually could have this like life that I've sort of always dreamed of, was up until now, honestly, too hard for me to even imagine. So again, really focusing on, instead of on the flip side of the things that were no longer a priority for me that I was still spending money on, was figuring out, then what the heck do I want? What do we want to spend money on? What is our priority? And for us and for me, it's like a very obvious one. It was just going on trips and vacations with our family of 4. Up until now, our sort of trip budget was non-existent, and anything we did do was honest. I was always like, I think we have enough money for this, or I think I've been careful enough this year to be able to pay for us to go on this trip at the end of the year. But really in the back of my mind, not really knowing what we can truly afford. So moving into 2025, this is the first year I've ever had an actual budget line for a vacation budget for our family, and we have made it $5,000 for the year, which might not sound like a lot, but to someone who up until now had zero budget, $5,000 feels crazy to me, absolutely nuts. And knowing that there is potential for me to have $5,000 every single year for our family to go on a vacation, a big, amazing trip, or a couple of small trips, it honestly, that is my rich life. Like knowing that I can have this and still like retire and still invest and still save is, I still can't honestly let it sink in. I have created this budget for 2025 months ago, and it still truly hasn't sunk in. It feels like an absolute gift. Have any of you or anyone else done this workbook? Have you read any other of Ramit's books? I think he has a new one coming out this year that's about couples maybe. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into that, but I just briefly heard that the other day. If you have any other finance or personal budget books that you love, I would love if you shared them below. I love to check them out. I like other people to see what you're sharing as well, what has maybe worked for you or has been like a huge turning point in your budget. Just like having that simplified, peaceful, clutter-free home has brought so much joy to our family and peace to me. I know having a clutter-free, simplified, peaceful budget and bank account has truly changed our lives. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for being here. And I will see you in next week's video. Bye guys.